So Sony has just announced the A7V, which is probably the perfect camera without including pretty much anything on my wish list. So let's kind of break it down. And they did not send me the camera this time, so I get to watch the announcement along with you, and we get to rip it together. Although probably not too much, because I had the A7 IV. I just recently upgraded to the A7R5 from it, and it was a great camera in so many areas, but I felt like it was just a couple features short of being the perfect camera for really the baseline people that it should have been created for. So that's kind of interesting, and I really hope it's going to be different this time, especially because Canon now released the R6 III. I've been testing it for a few weeks, and this is an awesome camera. Nikon, along with their Red partnership, is releasing some serious cameras. Panasonic even hit really hard this summer with the S1 II. And so that means Sony's kind of in this weird place right now of having the worst hybrid camera under $3,000. Unless this is the comeback camera that they probably need it to be. And Sony just dropped the introduction to the A7V out on YouTube. And since I don't have the camera in my hand, although I have had a briefing from Sony on this to kind of get into some of the details, I really want to watch this with you and just like figure out what they're marketing it, comment on some of these things and break them down for you, and then just figure out what they don't mention on the camera that they probably should and what missing features are there. So let's kind of take a look at this. So first of all right, we're going to stop. Like, I didn't even notice this at first, but I'm noticing it now. First tagline in this is redefine basic. I hate it. This is probably the worst thing of this entire thing. Redefine basic to me just says like, this is a basic camera and we're redefining what it is. I would never associate the A7 IV as a basic camera. Like it's not. It is very high intermediate as far as I'm concerned, at least. So I don't know if they just couldn't find a good word for that, but yeah, redefine basic, not my favorite. All right, the very next slide is a new processor. This is the XR2. I'm sure they're going to get into this a little bit more, so let's kind of wait and see what they do with it. So now we're seeing a bit of the hardware breakdown, and let's see if they talk about the new screen, because this is kind of the highlight of it, and no new screen in that build. So that was the introduction, and we really didn't have anything except this processor. Okay, so now we see the updated architecture with the latest technology. Basically what they're doing is Sony is taking what they used to have as two different chips, the XR processors, and they are combining them into a single chip with AI technology in it. And they used to have an AI processing chip on the A7R5, for example, has a separate AI processing chip. So now they're doing it all into one. And then we also have a full frame, partially stacked CMOS sensor with 33 megapixels. So this is the same resolution as before. So when I first kind of saw this in some of the leaks, I was kind of disappointed. But partially stacked makes a massive difference. It really separates everything on this sensor from anything they've done before, because it massively changes the readout speeds from this. And in the press briefing they gave us, they don't like give actual numbers, but they've kind of estimated what this is measuring based on some people who have tested it and some other information that they gave us. And basically this is like what the original A9 and A9 II were as far as read speeds on this. So this is fast. Like, this is fast enough to shoot most action and sports or wildlife with this sensor in fully electronic mode. Now what makes this even better is the last sensor from Sony on the A7 IV. That was not an amazing readout speed. It was really slow. You had rolling shutter like crazy. It was almost useless to me in electronic shutter. So if you wanted a silent shutter, you would probably see rolling shutter on it. You would probably see banding if you were inside in any crappy lighting. Now it is kind of interesting that Sony is not the first to do this partially stacked sensor. It was done before by Nikon with the Z6 III and Panasonic with the S1 II this summer. However, both of those brands have been known to use Sony cameras, or Sony sensors, so maybe that's the reason why, and they're actually using Sony sensors. This is now the highest resolution partially stacked sensor, so maybe that's now Sony's claim to fame and why they gave out that technology to Nikon and Panasonic potentially. All right, so we have another slide dedicated to this new processor, so that's good. It now says with integrated AI processing unit, so yeah, we're getting confirmation that it is. This is probably going to be a hint that we are going to see better performance overall from the camera, so like faster turn-on speeds, faster recognition when you hit the button, faster movement between the viewfinder and the screen, just overall everything. The interface should be faster. It's also probably a hint that we're going to see faster shooting speeds, we're going to see better autofocus performance, and hopefully hopefully video is going to be getting an upgrade as well. All right, so this slide, I don't think I've seen another camera really tout this. So this is deep learning based light source estimation for accurate auto white balance. That was a mouthful. They probably could have done that a little bit shorter. But basically what this is, I guess, saying is that it's using the AI processing chip or deep learning to recognize a scene and then more accurately dictate what white balance should be in that scene, which is good because if you think about it, like if you're taking a picture of an ocean, you're going to see a lot of blue. And so it might skew what the camera thinks should be the correct white balance, but it's supposed to show blue. So, and same thing with this like forest scene, like it is supposed to be a lot of green. So it needs to emphasize greens and yellows are okay. It doesn't need to shift the white balance more blue because it is supposed to be like that. So yeah, I think we're going to see some of the best auto white balance on this. And that's always good, even though I personally will end up editing white balance to taste in post. Having accurate white balance is just always a good thing and creates a better starting point. Now, wide 16 stop dynamic range. This is impressive. So I checked and the A7 IV was quoted as 15 stops. So Sony is actually saying that this could be better image quality than their previous camera, something that we haven't really seen in most cameras, and especially haven't seen when cameras prioritize speed with things like stack sensors or partially stacked sensors over quality. So Sony is apparently doing both on this one, and that would be pretty impressive on this. It does say Sony tests still images mechanical shutter. The one thing to keep in mind is that mechanical shutter on a lot of cameras will give you better image quality than electronic shutter. I'm not saying that that's going to be the case here, but it is kind of curious that they asterisk with mechanical shutter. But Sony is definitely quoting better dynamic range even with this focus on speed, which is awesome. Reduced noise at higher ISO sensitivities. This is also something that we typically wouldn't see. This is like near noiseless performance at ISO 6400, which would be insane, especially for doing it while still prioritizing speed. All right, so now we have the upgraded IBIS system in this. It is basically the upgraded IBIS system that we've been seeing in some of their newer cameras. It is a little bit better as far as performance, which is good because on the A7 IV, I would say Sony was kind of the worst of all of the competitors with IBIS. Nikon's was probably a little bit better, Canon's was definitely better, and Panasonic's was definitely better. So nice to see Sony stepping it up on this one as well. All right, so now we get to the next category on this, and this is AI-based recognition, which is probably going to be a lot of autofocus. And yeah, so we're seeing that Sony is able to use their AI, which is basically just machine learning. So basically it can identify a different target, but not just like a face and an eye, which is what they were doing before. Now they can use the entire human to be able to predict what they look like, where they should be, and where they should be looking. So the cameras that have this, like the A7R5, I've been so impressed. This has been able to eye autofocus through helmets. When the subject turns around, it's able to know where their eye should be. It's able to still track the subject even if they're not looking at the camera. And that's what it's showing right here. If you are shooting portraits, this is massive. Now, what's interesting is I shoot a lot of cars. When I shoot cars, I don't use any of this. I actually turn this off because it will identify a car and focus on it, but I don't know where on the car it's focusing. I don't know if it's the headlights. I don't know if it's the badge. I don't know if it's a person in the car. But if you're focusing on animals, birds, humans, especially portrait style photos for humans, this is going to be massive. It also works in video as well, which is really cool. AI-based real-time tracking. This is great. High density, 759 autofocus points. I think this is the same as before, but basically you can see it's focusing pretty much everywhere on the sensor. So this is about as advanced as you can get. Precise AF even down to -4 EV, so it should be pretty good in low light. It's not the lowest number I've seen, but it's pretty good and definitely some pretty low light as well. Selectable focus. All right, so it looks like you can get some new box sizes if you're using single point. I use single point a lot, again, because when I'm shooting cars and things like that, I need to find particular areas in the car that I'm focusing on. So this will be great for me as well. All right, next category, seamless shots. Again, I have absolutely no idea what that would mean. Okay, so here we go. Blackout free, 30 frames per second, continuous shooting with 14-bit RAW. This is going to be awesome. Okay, so a couple of things here. Yes, when you're shooting electronic shutter with a stacked sensor, you don't have any mechanical shutter, so nothing's going in front of the viewfinder, and you can shoot blackout free. It's great. Makes it really easy to track subjects if you're panning across the frame because you don't have any kind of blackouts in the viewfinder. So it's awesome. It's less distracting. Actually, just for note, if you want to shoot 10 frames per second in mechanical shutter on Sony cameras, it also drops you down from 14-bit RAW to 12-bit, I believe. So this is potentially higher quality shooting to be able to go to electronic shutter than to mechanical shutter if you are shooting continuous shooting. So something to keep in mind there. Also got up to 60 AFAE calculations per second. I think the A1 and stuff like that will do 120. Not quite those flagship cameras, but still plenty for this. Pre-capture. This is going to be good. I'm happy to see this. 0.03 seconds to 1 second. So this is cool. So yeah, anytime you hit that shutter, it can record up to a second before, which would be 30 images before if you have it at 30 frames per second. It's great to see this customized. You cannot customize this at all in the Canon R6 III. So now you can program exactly the length of time that you want to pre-capture, which is great because you might not need 30 seconds beforehand. You might just want, like, as soon as you hit it, just that little split second as you're hitting it to be captured, which is really awesome. One button continuous shooting. All right, this is something that I think we saw with the A9 III, and basically you could program a button to take you out of whatever high-speed mode you were in before, or low-speed mode, it didn't matter, into another high-speed priority mode. So basically, when you hit this button, let's say you put the camera into kind of a low-speed continuous at like 6 frames per second, which is normally what you would have if you were shooting wildlife, and then when the bird leaves a branch and starts flying, you hit this button and hold it down, and now it'll jump to 30 frames per second so you can capture the bird in flight. So this is a really cool feature. It kind of takes this high-speed shooting and makes it way more usable in real life because, yeah, you don't want to be shooting 30 frames per second with a bird on a tree. All right, so this is interesting. We have 12 creative look presets, including film looks, FL2, FL3. I don't know how many of them are going to be film looks necessarily. I mean, these particular pictures I don't think work really well with film looks, so kind of interesting that they chose this for it. Hopefully these are customizable because, again, what I usually find is these looks are kind of cool, but they're a little bit strong by default. So maybe we can customize it, something we'll definitely have to test, but I'm glad to see them trying to do it a little bit more. Most of the time these are JPEGs only, but they're great for when you don't want to edit an image in post and you just want something you can spit out a camera and have a cool look to it. All right, so extended raw processing for enhanced detail and reduced noise in editing. Again, kind of a mouthful how they word these, but this is something we've seen in some of the higher end cameras as well. Sony will process multiple images to get you more detail and even reduce noise than they've done before. Multi-frame HDR, that's awesome to see. We have Sony really expanding their external software to be able to do this. All right, this is interesting. So we have a few new raw file type modes. And what's interesting is the one that's been in cameras, Sony cameras, since the beginning, which is a regular uncompressed raw, is not here. So instead what we have is lossless compressed HQ, which is, I don't know why there's a difference in between lossless compressed and compressed. Usually those are so similar in quality, there isn't needed to be one in between. But the good thing, I guess, is that you'll be able to shoot pretty much lossless images without the file size of a typical RAW file. But I don't know why we don't have uncompressed on here. All right, so now we get to video. This is going to be big because this is where some of the biggest weaknesses of the A7 IV are. And here we have it, 7K oversampled 4K 60 recording, full pixel readout, no pixel binning, and this is, yeah, full frame even with 4K 60. So this is massive. The A7 IV had a pretty large 1.5x crop. It made it unusable for a massive market. I mean, all of my car videos are pretty much shot in 4K 60. Being able to do speed ramps and slow motion is almost imperative into some of that. So unless I'm shooting more commercial style real-time content, I'm shooting in 4K 60. A lot of home tours and boat tours and a lot of the other stuff like that need 4K 60 to be able to slow it down. Sony was like the only one that didn't have full frame 4K 60 in any camera, any hybrid camera, until you spent $7,000. Canon's been doing full frame 4K 60 since the original R6. I have no idea why it took Sony so long to get this right. It is here. The only warning is you will see this asterisk that says when 4K angle of view priority is on. So what this does is it prioritizes the full frame recording and doesn't prioritize high ISO noise reduction. So you probably won't have as much noise reduction as you would, especially at these higher ISOs. I find that it's almost like a different processing that occurs at these higher ISOs than lower ones. So there will probably be a minor difference, if at all, at lower ISOs. But when you start getting into like 12,000, 25,000 ISO and up, you'll probably start seeing it a lot more. You'll also probably won't see it in log recording as much, but you'll most likely notice it when you start going outside of those native ISOs on it. We do have 4K 120, which is great, and you do have this on the R6 II or R6 III, and it is uncropped 4K 120. So this is still cropped. I don't have as big of an issue with that because I find I'm not usually shooting wide angle 4K 120. I'm usually punching in, if anything, when I'm doing 4K 120. So I don't personally have as big of an issue with that. 4K 60 was the one that I needed full frame, and it is there. But we are also still seeing this 4K angle view priority mode has to be on in order to be able to get that, and it will not be available if you have that off. So just interesting to note on this. All right, so in-camera noise reduction, which is pretty cool. It looks like Sony is actually, I know Sony is using a third mic on this camera to be able to filter out background noise and stuff like that. So it's great to see mode processing or audio processing on this. However, there is no 32-bit float on this camera, which I think is a massive letdown because that is a really big feature that I would have loved to see on this. And basically, it's like a raw audio file, so you can adjust your audio in post, and it doesn't really put hard limits on your audio, so you can't really peak the audio. And if you need to raise the levels in post, you can do it. Now, active mode stabilization, I actually use this all the time on my cameras. It like punches in a little bit more, so you do have a crop factor on this. Sometimes it is a big issue. So if I'm shooting wide angle lenses, like a 16 to 35, I'll usually turn it off. Now there's also this dynamic active mode, which I think really imitates like a gimbal-like performance. So it punches in a lot. At this point, you are really punched in, almost like APS-C level, but you do have gimbal-like stabilization in camera. So if I ever didn't have a gimbal and needed that kind of gimbal-like look, this is when I would use it. Again, it's better to have it and not need it, but it is something that I personally don't really use. Now, auto framing is a feature we saw a little while back with some other Sony cameras. Basically kind of use it. They have this in like MacBook Pros with FaceTime cameras as well. But basically it punches in and you have a frame within a frame and it can track the camera. Again, like not something that I personally use, but if you're a solo recorder, it can get a little bit more of a dynamic look and almost like you're being followed around by another videographer. So S-Log3 is here, obviously. That would be pretty bad if it wasn't. You can now import LUTs, which you've seen on a lot of new Sony cameras. So it's going to have the whole LUT system from a lot of their new cameras are going to be on here as well. Shot marks to be able to, well, I mean, this is pretty nice. So you can extract images from your video files if you want to, anything like that. And that's really it for the video side of this, which is interesting because there's a lot that's missing that was on my wish list. 32-bit recording, open gate, ProRes, internal RAW, all of that is not mentioned here. So when it comes to a lot of these features that are on the latest Panasonic cameras and Nikon cameras and the Canon R6 III, to have them missing in the Sony kind of feels like a pretty big letdown. Even though they're not the things that I use on a daily basis, they were definitely on a wish list and things that could help out in a few different situations. So yeah, it kind of keeps this camera from feeling like the higher end video leader that Sony has always been, even in these hybrid cameras like the A7 series. So now we get to some new hardware and we have a 3.2 inch, $2.1 million viewfinder. And this is the 4-axis multi-angle LCD monitor that we've seen in cameras like the A7R5. This is an awesome flip screen. It's definitely the best one in the business. It's my personal favorite. It now increases in size because I think the A7 IV was 3 inches. It's going to 3.2. It's pretty much doubling the resolution. That was 1,000,000 dots. This is 2.1. This is a massive upgrade and one that you will appreciate on every daily basis with it. So I'm happy to see here. This was kind of like in the middle of my wish list and must-have list because even though it's not something that I needed to have, it was the one thing that kept me loving this camera, and a lot of competitors didn't have it. So yeah, it was a one feature that I felt like Sony could really pull everything forward. It now can adapt to horizontal and vertical orientation as well. Great to see. And it can do this in a few different ways. Also, you have a viewfinder upgrade, but not in resolution. So same 3.68 million dots, but now you're getting up to 120 frames per second instead of 60 frames per second. So this will make the viewfinder feel a little bit better, especially if you're shooting like sports and wildlife and high, fast moving stuff, which this camera is way better at. Now we're also getting two USB Type-C ports, one for power, one for expansion. This is great. It used to be a micro USB for expansion, and I'm going to be happy to throw away all my micro USB cables. So I pretty much only kept them around for that. Dual media slots. This is the same as the A7 IV. So you have one SD card slot and one slot that can go between SD and CF Express. I think the CF Express is going to be CF Express Type A on this one. This is going to be way more usable or needed on this camera because it is now recording 30 frames per second. To be able to clear that buffer, you're going to want to use these CF Express cards. My issue is I love this card layout. My only issue is these CF Express Type A cards are freaking expensive. Like, it's crazy. They are so much more expensive than CF Express Type B cards that what the R6 II or R6 III would use. And they are not even as fast, but otherwise they're a great format, and you can use both cards in the same slot, which is great. So you can use two SD cards or one CF Express and one SD as a backup. So great being able to switch between both of those formats. Dust and moisture resistance, obviously expected. Magnesium alloy. It's good to see them mention this kind of stuff because it means that they are confident in it. Now this is big. Heat dissipation for up to 90 minutes of recording. This is massive for two reasons. So first of all, the A7 IV overheated like crazy. It overheated on me because this is a 7K oversample to 4K video. So the processor is doing crazy amounts of work. So we're probably seeing more efficient processing plus an actual heat dissipation system on this. It is quoting numbers for even at high temperatures. So 105 degrees, it's able to record for over an hour. This is awesome. It doesn't have a built-in fan to it, but if they can pull off these numbers, this is going to be great. I couldn't ever record weddings or anything like that on my A7 IV. Even like interviews or YouTube style videos like this, if I was recording for more than 30-45 minutes, I would overheat that camera like crazy. So we also have more advanced Wi-Fi modes for wireless tethering and stuff like that, remote shooting, some of the newer bands on it, easy 4K streaming via USB. This is something the other cameras had, but yeah, great to see it on this camera as well. USB into your computer to the camera, and you can set up a live stream like that. You don't need any other software. We have Sony Creator Cloud support from shooting to production. I have a love-hate relationship with this app. I think it's kind of bloated, and there's a lot you can do with it, so we'll have to see how it works. But it's so bloated. If you want to just do remote shooting, it's just kind of a pain in the butt to use this versus the other kind of more simpler apps that Sony used to use. We have remote tethering shooting available from the desktop app as well. They're composites and things like that for being able to get more detail and for reducing noise. The monitor and control app will now work with this, which is actually a pretty good app for doing video remote monitoring and controlling the camera from somewhere else, from your phone or something like that, which is really cool. And that is it for the presentation. So here are my thoughts on the camera so far. And again, stay tuned for the full review. I have the camera coming in any day now, so a lot is going to be posted really soon. But basically, this is the camera I needed Sony to make. They needed 4K full frame 4K 60. They needed the faster sensor. They needed a usable electronic shutter to really compete with everything else, and then just to give really good features like being able to shoot silently and being able to keep up with shooting sports and wildlife. On the other hand, it doesn't feel as exciting, especially on the video side, as I hoped it would. Sony is not matching the features of Canon and Nikon and Panasonic with things like 32-bit float and open gate and internal RAW and ProRes. And even on the photo side, where Sony does have the faster readout sensor with their partially stacked sensor, the Canon can shoot 40 frames per second with the same resolution, which is 25% faster, and it does also have a faster mechanical shutter. And right now, Sony is pricing the A7 V at $2,900, which is really expensive and more expensive than the Canon R6 III, and also $900 more than the A7 IV, which is on sale right now. So I'll leave a link below to that one as well. That's a massive difference in money when the main drivers are going to be a full frame 4K 60 and the ability to shoot faster frame rates when you're using the electronic shutter. Now, I currently mostly shoot with Sony cameras. I've got the A7R5, the A1 I'm recording this on, and the FX3. And right now, Sony's only good hybrid kind of do-it-all-in-one camera is the $7,000 A1 II. And that means that the A7 V now fits this great medium of being a good hybrid camera from Sony below $3,000. And so I'm probably going to end up buying it. So even though I was hoping for more, the fact that this does everything I needed to, it has amazing image quality, even better than before, hopefully. The latest autofocus tech, it has faster frame rates for when I want to shoot like car racing and things like that. It has full frame oversampled 4K 60, less overheating, by far less overheating. And my favorite feature on the A7R5, which is this 4-axis flip screen, is now on this as well. All my must-haves are here, and they are all better than they have ever been before. But I do have one word of caution for Sony. Open gate recording, 32-bit float, ProRes RAW, all of that kind of stuff. I don't think this is the camera that needed open gate on a mid-priced hybrid camera. But if you introduced a Sony FX4 without open gate and 32-bit float and all that kind of stuff in 2026, that will probably be a massive mistake. Now, let me know what you guys think of this camera and what you want to see in the full review. I'll be posting BTS of all of this over on IG, so you can hit me up there. Hope you guys are doing amazing. I'll catch you in the next one.